Suffering is something every human being faces. It comes in many forms: pain, fear, loss, sadness, and confusion. Often we feel trapped in it, unable to find a way out. We search for solutions in religion, philosophy, or distractions, but nothing seems to free us completely. The key to overcoming suffering is not found in external things, but in deeply understanding the mind itself. The mind creates suffering, holds on to pain, and keeps us stuck in fear and regret. If we can understand how the mind works, we can begin to free ourselves from its control. Life is full of suffering, and most of the time, we don't understand why we feel pain. Whether it's emotional trauma, depression, or confusion about life, the root of our suffering is our mind. The mind constantly questions everything: who we are, why things happen, what is right or wrong. But real freedom comes when we no longer get trapped in these endless questions. Making mistakes is natural because the body and mind are designed to make mistakes. But getting stuck in guilt or regret only adds to our suffering. The key is to keep questioning, not in search of immediate answers, but as a way to develop deep understanding. When we chase answers desperately, we only rely on the knowledge we already have, which limits us. Instead, when we stay patient and allow understanding to develop naturally, true wisdom emerges. Most people believe suffering comes from the outside world, what others do to us, unfortunate events, or bad circumstances. But suffering is not just about what happens. It's about how our mind reacts to what happens. The same event can affect two people differently. One person may move on, while another carries the pain for years. This shows that suffering is created inside the mind, not outside. The mind is always remembering the past or worrying about the future. It brings up old wounds, making them feel real again. Or it imagines future dangers, making us anxious and afraid. In reality, the past is gone, and the future hasn't come yet. But the mind keeps us trapped in both. The mind also creates suffering through desire and attachment. We want things to be a certain way, and when reality is different from our expectations, we feel pain. We desire love, success, security, and recognition. But when we don't get them or fear losing them, we suffer. Even when we do get what we want, the mind is never satisfied. It always wants more, always fears change. If we deeply understand this, we see that suffering is not caused by life itself, but by our resistance to life as it is. The more we fight reality, the more we suffer. To heal, we must learn to observe the mind without getting caught in its traps. Right now, if you sit quietly and watch your thoughts, you will see they appear and disappear on their own. Some are pleasant, some are painful, but none of them last forever. Yet we often believe every thought as if it is the absolute truth. This is why we suffer. We identify with thoughts, thinking they define who we are. But if we observe carefully, we see that thoughts are just passing movements in the mind. They come and go like clouds in the sky. The moment we realize we are not our thoughts, we take the first step toward freedom. Another trap of the mind is being caught in psychological time. Instead of living fully in the present, we are always thinking about the past or the future. We regret, we wish things had been different, or we fear what might come next. But if we ask ourselves, right now, in this very moment, is there any real problem? We often find that the present is not the problem. The problem is our mind's attachment to something outside the present. When we fully experience this moment without carrying the weight of past and future, we taste real freedom. Understanding suffering does not mean escaping from life. It means facing life fully without fear or resistance. It means seeing the mind's tricks and no longer being controlled by them. When we stop identifying with every thought and emotion, suffering begins to lose its power over us. The mind may still bring painful memories or fears, but we no longer get lost in them. We see them as passing waves in the ocean of consciousness. They come and go, but our deeper awareness remains untouched. This is the beginning of true healing. People often obsess over their desires. They think if they want something badly enough, they will get it, but sometimes the obsession itself becomes suffering. Instead of constantly thinking about what we want, we should keep our minds open and trust that things will unfold when the time is right. This is not about blind faith, but about understanding the process of life. Everything happens at the right time when we are truly ready for it. But when we keep running after things without inner stability, we become blind to what is already present. Our problem is that we are always running, physically and mentally, without stopping to truly see what is in front of us. The more we run, the more problems we create for ourselves. To truly understand life, patience is the most important thing. Just as we cannot master a subject like physics overnight, we cannot expect to understand life instantly. Real understanding is like a process. It takes time, deep observation, and a willingness to sit with our questions without rushing for answers. We often confuse knowledge with understanding. Knowing something intellectually is different from experiencing it deeply. The real question we must ask is, who is the one experiencing? Who is suffering? Who is the one seeing all this? The answer lies in realizing that the observer, the one who sees, is always greater than what is seen. If we can see something, then it means we are separate from it. This realization is powerful because it shows us that we are not our suffering. The problem is that we identify too much with our pain, our emotions, and our thoughts, forgetting that we are actually the one observing them. For example, if we look at an elephant, it is massive, but our mind can hold the image of the elephant within it. This means our mind is vast, greater than any single experience. If we can hold an entire world within our mind, then how can we be limited by just one painful moment? The deeper we understand this, the more confidence we gain. Slowly, we start realizing that no matter how big our problems seem, they are small compared to the vast awareness within us. Most of our suffering comes from a misunderstanding of who we are. We think we are just our body, our thoughts, our emotions, but in reality, we are the observer behind all of it. This observer is untouched by suffering. The key to overcoming suffering is to develop a deep awareness of this truth. The more we realize that we are not just the mind, the more we gain freedom. The moment we shift our perspective, everything changes. A negative situation can suddenly appear neutral or even positive. It is our thinking that gives power to suffering. And when we stop feeding negative thoughts, their impact on us weakens. This is where true healing begins. Witnessing our emotions without being consumed by them is the path to inner peace. Many people search for happiness, but real happiness is not about avoiding suffering. It is about understanding suffering so deeply that it no longer controls us. This is not about escaping pain, but about seeing through it. Pain is not the enemy. It is simply a signal, a teacher. Instead of running from it, we need to observe it, understand it, and let it pass through us without attachment. Most people try to escape suffering by distracting themselves with work, relationships, or material success. But no external achievement can ever remove internal pain. Real happiness comes from realizing that we are already complete, that nothing outside of us can truly define us. This is why deep self-inquiry is necessary. Instead of looking for external solutions, we must ask, who am I? Am I my body, my thoughts, my emotions, or something beyond them? The more we sit with this question, the more clarity we gain. Society teaches us to identify with our roles, doctor, engineer, businessman, but these are just labels. Who are we without these labels? Understanding this is the beginning of real freedom. Once we see through the illusion of false identity, suffering naturally dissolves. Religious texts and scriptures often touch upon these truths, but people usually misunderstand them. They follow rituals blindly without truly grasping the deeper wisdom behind them. True wisdom is not about believing in concepts, but about direct experience. Bhagavad Gita, for example, speaks directly to the root of our suffering: ignorance. We suffer because we do not know who we truly are. Once we remove this ignorance, suffering disappears on its own. If we look at the world, we see suffering everywhere. Rich people suffer in their own way. Poor people suffer in theirs. No amount of money, power, or success can remove suffering completely. The reason is that suffering is not caused by external circumstances but by internal ignorance. People search for happiness outside, thinking that achieving certain things will make them happy. But happiness is not something to be achieved. It is something to be realized. The only way to be truly free is to deeply understand the nature of the self. Many spiritual seekers confuse intellectual understanding with realization. Just because we know something conceptually does not mean we have experienced it deeply. True realization is not about collecting knowledge but about seeing reality as it is. It is about directly perceiving the truth that we are not separate from existence. We are existence itself. Once we realize this, suffering loses its grip on us. Ultimately, life is not about escaping suffering, but about transcending it. When we stop identifying with our pain, our mind naturally settles into peace. Acceptance does not mean giving up. It means seeing things clearly and allowing them to be as they are. When we stop fighting reality, reality stops being a problem. This is the path to true freedom.